Marriage is a sacred bond between two people that symbolizes their commitment to each other to be in a loving and mutually supportive partnership throughout their lives until the end of their lives. This is a merging of two souls who come together to form a third entity, the couple. Each individual person contributes to the health and growth of the relationship. The covenant of marriage may have been entered into in a spiritual or religious place and witnessed by family and friends. The vows exchanged represent the moral and ethical commitment to honesty, compassion, and fidelity. The vows may speak of the public commitment to support and stand by each other throughout the challenges that life will bring. Marriage involves a balance of interdependence, where partners rely on each other while maintaining individual identities. It symbolizes the unity of two lives, creating a stronger, cohesive unit that stands side by side and walks forward together. Traditionally, marriage is seen as the foundation for raising children, providing them with a stable and loving environment. And so the loving bond and commitment between two people expands to include the children they bring into the world. Creating a family represents the continuity of family lineage and cultural heritage. And so as a married person, you may see your identity as a husband or wife, a supportive partner, a loyal friend, a family member, a mother or father, an aunt or uncle, a confidant, a lover, a social planner, household manager, financial provider, caretaker, and emotional anchor. When the time comes that the marriage is disintegrating and divorce is imminent, it can lead to an ego death. And with the death of the ego comes a spiritual crisis that is known as the dark night of the soul. And ego death, while painful to endure, is the portal to your growth and development as a higher consciousness, above the egoic planes where so much of our adult life is lived. Hi, I'm Patty Blue Hayes, author, coach, and your guide to blossoming beyond heartbreak and cultivating hope as you sow the seeds of healing. First, let's understand from a Jungian perspective what the human ego is. The ego is the central core of the conscious mind and acts as a mediator between the inner and outer worlds. It encompasses our sense of self and personal identity, and it organizes our thoughts, memories, perceptions, and emotions. The ego is tasked with mediating reality, navigating between the demands of the external world and our internal drives and instincts. It helps us understand and interact with our environment and external situations in a practical and realistic manner. The ego functions as the executive component of the psyche, making decisions, setting goals, and planning actions. It helps us exercise control over our impulses and behaviors, ensuring that we act in accordance with our values and societal norms. The ego provides a cohesive sense of I, or personal identity, integrating various aspects of the self into a unified whole. It maintains the continuity of our personal narrative over time, allowing for self-reflection and introspection. According to Jung, the ego is the gateway through which unconscious content can become conscious. While the ego itself is conscious, it interacts with the unconscious aspects of the psyche, including the personal unconscious, repressed memories, forgotten experiences, and the collective unconscious, archetypal symbols and motifs. The ego often deals with opposing forces within the psyche, such as rational and irrational thoughts, conscious and unconscious desires, and the demands of the inner world versus the outer world. The ego strives to maintain balance and harmony among these opposites. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the process of integrating different parts of the psyche including the shadow, anima, animus, and the self, into a harmonious whole. The ego plays a critical role in this process by bringing unconscious elements into consciousness and reconciling them with the conscious self. The ego is deeply tied to how we see ourselves and our sense of individuality, how we fit into society. It shapes our self-image and self-concept. The ego is concerned with maintaining and improving our self-esteem and self-worth. It seeks validation and approval from others. The ego constantly compares itself to others, striving to be better or superior in some way. The ego seeks social status, recognition, and respect from others. It wants to be seen as important and valued. The ego desires control over situations and people. It thrives on the sense of power and influence. The ego desires a sense of security and safety, both physically and emotionally. It avoids situations that threaten its stability. On a basic level, the ego is concerned with physical and psychological survival, ensuring our needs and desires are met. And now let's see how a divorce can be the death of the ego. The concept of death of the ego refers to a profound transformation of consciousness where the usual sense of self or ego is transcended or dissolved. This can lead to a state of higher awareness and connectedness, but it is not without a painful shattering of the illusions the ego has created. Please help me continue to create these videos by subscribing to my channel if you find this content valuable. I'll use my own situation as an example. All of the identities I spoke of before, wife, confidant, loyal friend, family member, crumbled in the moments after my husband said he didn't want to be married anymore. Who was I if I was not the supportive wife? Who was I now that I had failed as a wife? Who was I without my husband? The ego experienced shame and judgment due to the demotion in socioeconomic status. The ego, who needed to keep a certain standard, was in a free fall that dismantled all of what the ego needs to survive. No more love from the man I had a sacred bond with. No more approval and validation from others. No more status as a spouse or homeowner. No more identity from the various roles I had as his wife. No more psychological or financial safety. No more cohesive sense of personal identity. If you want to read about my desperate struggle between wanting to live or die during my death of the ego spiritual crisis, you can find my book, Wine, Sex, and Suicide, My Near-Death Divorce, on Amazon. The healing journey or resurrection of the soul will be different for everyone. But no matter the length of time or the path that led you to your soul's healing, there are some universal attributes shared by people who have transcended the death of the ego. The death of the ego is often associated with a spiritual awakening or enlightenment, where people experience a deep connection with the energy of creation of their souls. The positive result from a higher state of consciousness is true freedom. There is a dissolution of self-identity from the egoic perspective and the rigid boundaries of status, color, and all those categories we created. They blur or vanish altogether. Other people are viewed as oneness and not differentiated from us by the discernments used by the ego. There is a significant reduction in the attachment to material possessions, social status, and personal desires, and an increase in appreciation and gratitude for what already is. The dissolution of the ego can lead to a profound sense of inner peace, contentment, and freedom from the constant striving and incessant desires driven by the ego. For me, my inner peace is the most precious thing I have, more valuable to me than anything else. And the freedom to live according to my values and desires without suffering from comparison-itis is liberating. With the ego dissolved, You may often feel a greater sense of compassion and empathy for others, seeing yourself as interconnected with all beings. The inner critic is silenced, judgments and assumptions put aside to reveal similarities, understanding, and curiosity. Without the ego's constant preoccupation with the past and future, we can fully embrace the present moment, the absolute only place where life is truly lived. This leads to a more mindful and enriched experience of life because we are present in the now. Are you going through an ego death? If you are, my hope is that there's a part of you who understands that this metamorphosis is the very thing that is necessary in order for you to heal from past pain and evolve into the next higher consciousness version of yourself. You will be stronger and wiser for having survived this dark night of the soul. Just keep going and trust the process. Remember, you're on a journey of healing and transformation. The seed does not become a blossom overnight.